The roar of 50,000 aliens filled the massive arena on Nexus Prime. The Galactic Coliseum stretched high into the artificial sky, its walls gleaming with holographic displays showing warriors from across the galaxy. In the center ring, two fighters circled each other like predators. Park Dae-ho sat in the cheap seats far from the action. His empty left sleeve was pinned neatly to his faded jacket. 3 years ago, he would have been down there in the ring, hearing his name chanted by crowds who called him the Earthen Blade. Now he was just another face in the crowd, living on a small pension that barely covered his rent. The current match was almost over. Veltar the Unstoppable dominated the arena floor. The Krex warrior stood 8 feet tall, his reptilian scales shimmering with bio-enhanced armor that moved like liquid metal. 4 powerful arms ended in claws that could slice through steel. Energy weapons hummed in 2 of his hands while the other 2 flexed, ready to strike. His opponent, a brave but foolish Zentari warrior, lasted exactly 47 seconds. Veltar moved like lightning, his enhanced reflexes making him nearly impossible to follow. The crowd cheered as the Zentari hit the arena floor, unconscious but alive. Veltar always left his opponents breathing. It was better for his reputation. That way. Dae-ho watched without emotion. He had seen this before many times. Veltar was good, very good, but he relied too much on his enhancements. Real warriors, the kind Dae-ho used to be, won with skill and intelligence, not artificial improvements. The victory ceremony began. Veltar raised all 4 arms to the crowd, his reptilian features twisted in a cruel smile. The arena's announcer, a blue-skinned Vorthon, began the usual speech about galactic champions and warrior honor. Dae-ho started to leave. He had seen enough. Then Veltar's voice boomed through the arena's speakers. "Wait," the champion called out, his enhanced vocal, chords making his voice carry to every corner of the massive space. "I see someone in the crowd who needs to hear this." Dae-ho stopped walking. Something cold settled in his stomach. Veltar's yellow eyes scanned the seats until they found Dae-ho. The champion pointed directly at him with one clawed finger. "Look. There. Citizens of the galaxy. Do you see him? The mighty Park Dae-ho, once called the greatest human warrior who ever lived." The crowd's noise died away. Thousands of alien eyes turned to stare at Dae-ho. Camera drones buzzed closer, broadcasting his face across the galaxy. "Behold the legend," Veltar continued, his voice dripping with mock respect. "The apex predator, the unstoppable human. Look how far the mighty have fallen." He gestured at Dae-ho's empty sleeve, his cheap clothes, his place in the poor seats. "From galactic champion to one-armed beggar, living on scraps and memories." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not cruel laughter exactly, but the kind that comes when people see something once great brought low. It hurt worse than cruelty would have. "This is what becomes of human champions," Veltar announced. "They break. They fall. They become nothing. Remember this when you think humans belong among the stars with real warriors." The laughter grew louder. Dae-ho felt the weight of those thousands of stares, the whispers, the pointing. His face showed nothing. He had learned long ago not to let his emotions show where enemies could see them. He turned and walked out of the arena. No hurried escape, no dramatic exit. Just a quiet man leaving quietly, as if nothing important had happened. In the arena's medical wing, Dr. Yoon Hairi had been watching the ceremony on a wall screen while organizing her equipment. She was one of only 3 humans working at the Coliseum, and she took pride in her job. Human medicine was respected throughout the galaxy, even if human warriors were not. She saw everything: the pointing, the mocking, the laughter. Her hands clenched into fists as she watched Dae-ho walk away with dignity intact, despite the humiliation. Hairi made a quick decision. She grabbed her medical kit and followed him. She caught up with Dae-ho in a quiet corridor leading to the transport stations. He walked steadily, neither fast nor slow, his remaining hand relaxed at his side. "Excuse me," she called out. "Mr. Park?" He stopped and turned. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the small scars that marked a warrior's face. But his dark eyes were still sharp, still alert. They studied her with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust strangers. "Dr. Yoon," she introduced herself, showing her medical badge. "I work here at the Coliseum. I wanted to offer medical assistance. Sometimes injuries from the past can cause problems, and I noticed—" She gestured carefully at his missing arm. "Thank you," Daeho said quietly. His voice was calm, controlled. "But I am fine." "Are you sure? I specialize in combat injuries. I might be able to help with phantom pain, or balance issues, or—" "I am fine," he repeated, not unkindly. "But I appreciate your concern." He started to walk away, then paused and looked back at her. "Dr. Yoon, was it? Thank you for your kindness. It has been a while since someone offered help instead of pity." As he walked away, Hairi noticed something that made her medical training alert. His right hand, the one that remained, bore fresh calluses across the knuckles and palm. His walking gait was perfectly balanced despite his missing arm. His shoulders were straight, not hunched like someone who had given up. Most telling of all were his eyes. She had seen the eyes of broken fighters before. They were empty, defeated, looking inward at their failures. Daeho's eyes were different. They watched everything, calculated everything, missed nothing. They were the eyes of a predator that was very much still alive. That night, in her small apartment, Hairi pulled up Daeho's old fight recordings. She watched match after match, studying his style. He had been incredible, moving with a fluid grace that made his opponents look clumsy. His signature technique, the Phantom Strike, was legendary. He could attack so quickly and from such unexpected angles that it seemed like he had multiple arms striking at once. But what impressed her most was not his speed or strength. It was his intelligence. Daeho studied his opponents like a scientist, learning their patterns, finding their weaknesses, then exploiting those weaknesses with surgical precision. He was not just a fighter. He was a strategist, a tactician, a student of war. The recordings ended 3 years ago with his final battle at Kepler Station. The footage was classified military material, but the basic facts were public. Daeho had held off an entire Void Reaper assault fleet single-handedly while 50,000 civilians evacuated. He had destroyed their flagship by manually detonating the station's reactor core, losing his left arm in the explosion. A hero's sacrifice. A warrior's end. But as Hairi turned off the recordings and prepared for bed, she could not shake the memory of those alert, calculating eyes. Broken warriors did not have eyes like that. Somewhere across the city, in a small apartment that smelled of cheap food and old dreams, Daeho sat in his single chair and stared out the window at the lights of Nexus Prime. His right hand moved, slowly, repeatedly, practicing motions that no one could see. In his mind, he replayed every second of Veltar's mockery. Not the words, which meant nothing, but the champion's stance, his expressions, his timing. Everything was information. Everything could be useful. A predator, Daeho had learned long ago, did not announce its intentions. It simply waited for the right moment to hunt. 2 days after the humiliation at the Coliseum, Daeho sat in Marco's Diner, a small restaurant that served decent food to working people who could not afford the fancy places. The owner, Marco Benedetti, was one of the few humans who had settled on Nexus Prime before it became famous. He treated everyone fairly and asked no questions about their past. Daeho was halfway through his meal when memories began to surface, as they often did when he was alone and quiet. 5 years ago, he had stood in this same arena as champion. The crowd had chanted his name as he faced Korath the Destroyer, a massive warrior from the Gorvani Empire. Korath stood 12 feet tall and weighed 800 pounds of muscle and bone. His people were natural warriors, bred for combat, over thousands of years. The betting odds had been heavily against the human. Daeho was only 6 feet tall and weighed less than 200 pounds. He carried no weapons except for a simple combat knife. Korath wielded a plasma hammer that could shatter steel. But Daeho had spent weeks studying Korath's previous fights. He learned that the giant warrior favored his left side when attacking. He discovered that Korath's massive size made quick direction changes difficult. Most importantly, he noticed that the warrior's pride made him predictable. The fight had lasted exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Daeho used Korath's own strength against him, leading the giant into overcommitting to attacks that left him exposed. When the moment was right, Daeho struck with his Phantom Strike technique. 2. The crowd, it looked like magic. Daeho seemed to move in multiple directions at once, his arms creating a blur of motion that confused the eye. In reality, it was pure technique combined with perfect timing. He struck Korath 7 times in less than 2 seconds, each blow precisely placed to disrupt the giant's balance and nervous system. Korath had fallen like a tree, unconscious before he hit the ground. The crowd had gone wild, chanting Earthen Blade, until the arena shook. Those days seemed like a lifetime ago. "Excuse me, are you Park Daeho?" Daeho looked up from his memories to see a young human man standing beside his table. The boy looked, about 20 with grease-stained hands and excited eyes. He wore the coveralls of a maintenance worker. "My name is Kim Tae-sung," the young man said, his voice nervous but determined. "I work on the mechanical systems here at the Coliseum. I was wondering if I could talk to you for a minute." Daeho gestured to the empty chair across from him. Tae-sung sat down quickly, pulling a small tablet from his pocket. "I saw what happened the other day," Tae-sung said, his anger obvious. "Veltar is a coward who picks on people who cannot fight back. But I think I know something that might interest you." He activated his tablet, showing Daeho a series of combat recordings. "I have been studying Veltar's fights for months. Everyone thinks he is perfect, but he is not. Look here." The recordings played in slow motion, showing Veltar's victories frame by frame. Tae-sung pointed to specific moments with growing excitement. "See this? When Veltar switches between multiple targets, there is a delay. 0.3 seconds where his enhanced reflexes actually work against him. His bio-enhancements make him faster, but they also make him dependent on pre-programmed responses. When the situation changes quickly, there is a gap." Daeho studied the recordings carefully. The boy was right. There was indeed a tiny hesitation when Veltar had to change tactics mid-fight. It was almost invisible, but it was there. "Why are you showing me this?" Daeho asked. Tae-sung's face grew serious. "Because someone needs to put that monster in his place, and because you are still Park Daeho, no matter what anyone says." Before Daeho could respond, another voice interrupted them. "Mr. Park? I am Lee So-min from Galactic Sports Network." They looked up to see a woman in her 30s with a professional smile and a small recording device. She was clearly a reporter. "I am doing a documentary about warriors who shaped galactic combat sports," she continued, sitting down without being invited. "I would like to interview you about your career and what you are doing now." "I am not interested," Daeho said simply. "Please, just a few questions. Your story could inspire people. The fall from glory, the struggle to find meaning after." I said no. Daeho's voice remained calm, but something in his tone made the reporter stop talking. She tried a different approach. "What about the accusations that human fighters were specifically targeted by certain alien warrior guilds? I have been researching the deaths of several human competitors over the past few years. All ruled as training accidents, but the pattern is suspicious." This got Daeho's attention. His eyes sharpened as he looked at her more carefully. "What deaths?" Tae-sung asked. So-min pulled out her own tablet, showing them a list of names and dates. 12 human fighters, all promising competitors, all dead in accidents during the same period that Veltar rose to prominence. The odds of this being coincidence are practically zero. Daeho studied the list. He recognized some of the names. Good fighters, skilled and honorable. If they had been murdered... "You have proof of this?" he asked. "Not yet, but I am working on it. The Krex Empire has powerful friends who help cover things up. However, if someone were to challenge Veltar publicly, it might force them to be more careful. The galactic spotlight makes it harder to arrange accidents." So-min leaned forward. "I know you think your fighting days are over, Mr. Park, but what if they are not? What if this is not about your career but about justice?" Daeho was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, leaving money on the table for his meal. I am not the man I used to be, he told them. That man died at Kepler Station. He walked away, leaving Taesung and So-min staring after him. But as he walked through the streets of Nexus Prime, Daeho's mind was working. 12 dead humans. A pattern of accidents. A champion who mocked the fallen and thought himself untouchable. That night in his small apartment, Daeho opened a locked box he had not touched in 3 years. Inside were his old training weights, designed for one-handed exercises he had never thought he would need. He began with simple movements, testing his remaining arms' strength and flexibility. The muscles remembered, even after years of inactivity. Pain shot through his shoulder where nerves had been damaged in the explosion, but he pushed through it. By morning, sweat covered his floor and his right arm ached in ways it had not felt since his fighting days. But for the first time in 3 years, Park Daeho felt like a warrior again. Across the city, Dr. Hae-ri reviewed the medical scans she had taken during yesterday's fights. Something bothered her about Veltar's latest victory. The champion had been slightly slower than usual, his reactions a fraction off normal timing. His bioenhancement readings showed signs of stress that had not been present in earlier fights. She cross-referenced the data with medical journals about enhancement addiction. The symptoms matched perfectly. Veltar was becoming dependent on his artificial improvements, and dependency always led to degradation. Meanwhile, Taesung worked late in the Colosseum's maintenance tunnels, his mind racing with ideas. He had access to the arena's entire technical database, including the specifications for all the equipment used in championship fights. If someone were to challenge Veltar, they would need every possible advantage. He began designing modifications to standard human combat gear, improvements that would enhance natural abilities without replacing them, equipment that would work with human instincts rather than against them. And in her hotel room, So-min compiled evidence about the suspicious deaths of human fighters. The pattern was clear to anyone who knew how to look. Someone had been systematically eliminating human competitors, clearing the way for alien dominance in galactic combat sports. The question was whether anyone would be brave enough to do something about it. 3 blocks away, Daeho continued his training, his movements precise and controlled despite the pain. Each exercise was calculated to rebuild not just strength, but the specific type of strength he would need for what was coming. Because something was coming. He could feel it in his bones, in his warrior's instincts that had never truly died. The hunt was about to begin. The video clip spread across the galactic network like wildfire. Within hours of Veltar's public humiliation of Daeho, every major news outlet was broadcasting the footage. Fallen human champion mocked by galactic warrior became the most viewed story of the week. Ambassador Choi Min-ho watched the clip for the 5th time from his office in the Galactic Council building. Each viewing made his situation worse. As humanity's representative to the galaxy's governing body, he had spent years building respect for his species. Now that respect was crumbling in real time, his communication device buzzed with incoming calls from human colony worlds, all asking the same question. What was he going to do about this insult? The answer was nothing, because there was nothing he could do. Veltar had committed no crime. Public mockery was not against galactic law, especially when it was true. The door to his office opened without a knock. Zektar, the Krex Empire's chief ambassador, slithered in with the confident smile of someone who held all the winning cards. "Min-ho, my old friend," Zektar said, his forked tongue tasting the air. "I trust you saw the entertainment from yesterday's matches." "What do you want, Zektar?" The Krex diplomat settled his large body into the reinforced chair across from Min-ho's desk. "I want to discuss the upcoming trade negotiations, specifically the military protection clauses for human shipping lanes." Min-ho felt cold dread settle in his stomach. Those protection agreements were vital for human commerce. Without them, human merchant ships would be vulnerable to pirates and raiders throughout the outer sectors. "The Council has been reconsidering," Zektar continued, "whether humans truly need the same level of protection as other species. After all, if your greatest warrior can be reduced to such a pathetic state, perhaps your merchant vessels are not as valuable as we previously believed. You cannot be serious." "Oh, but I am." The Council questions whether humanity truly belongs among the galactic powers. Yesterday's display was quite educational in that regard. Zektar stood to leave, then paused at the door. Of course, if humans could demonstrate that they still possess warrior spirit, if they could prove their worth in honorable combat, the Council might reconsider. But who among your people would dare face our champions now? After the Krex ambassador left, Minho slumped in his chair and buried his face in his hands. In one day, decades of diplomatic progress had been undone by a few minutes of cruel laughter. Across the galaxy, other human representatives faced similar challenges. Trade agreements were being reconsidered, military alliances questioned. The message was clear. Humanity's status among the galactic powers was dropping fast. In his apartment, Deho watched the news coverage without expression. The reporters dissected his career, his fall from grace, his current life of quiet obscurity. They interviewed experts who explained why humans were naturally inferior warriors, why their brief success had been a fluke. Dr. Hyrie found him there, 3 days later. She had been worried when he missed his regular meal at Marco's diner, so she had tracked down his address through medical records. "You should not be alone right now," she said, settling into his only other chair without being invited. "I am fine." "No, you are not. No one would be fine after what happened. The entire galaxy is talking about you like you are some kind of cautionary tale." Deho finally looked at her. "And what would you have me do, Doctor? Challenge Veltar to restore human honor? March into the arena and get killed for the entertainment of people who already think humans are worthless?" "I do not know," she admitted. "But I know that sitting here doing nothing is not the answer." She pulled out her medical scanner, running it over his body before he could protest. The readings made her eyes widen. "Deho, your muscle density has increased by 15% in the last week. Your bone density is up 12%. Your cardiovascular efficiency is through the roof. What have you been doing?" He looked away. "Exercise. This is not normal exercise. This is professional-level conditioning. Your body is preparing for combat, whether your mind admits it or not." She leaned forward, studying his face carefully. "Your pupils show enhanced focus patterns. Your hands have new calluses in specific locations. Your balance and posture have shifted to compensate for asymmetric weight distribution. Everything about your physiology says you are training to fight." "I am not." "Yes, you are." She stood up, pacing his small living room. "Your body knows what your mind has not accepted yet. You are going to fight Veltar." That evening, Taesung visited with his tablet full of technical data. He had been working day and night on equipment modifications, designing gear specifically for one-armed combat. "Look at this," he said excitedly, showing Deho his designs. "Lightweight armor that redistributes impact force, balance enhancers that work with your natural movement patterns, weapons designed for single-hand operation but maximum effectiveness. I have told you before I am not fighting anyone. But you could. You could beat him, I know you could. The delay I found in his response patterns, it is getting worse. I have been analyzing his recent fights, and the enhancement addiction is making him sloppy. He relies too much on artificial speed, and not enough on strategy." Taesung pulled up more data. "Plus, I have been researching his training methods. He prepares for opponents who fight conventionally. No one has ever faced him with a completely asymmetric fighting style. He would not know how to adapt." Deho studied the technical specifications despite himself. The boy's work was impressive, creative, and practical. He had thought of problems Deho had not even considered. "Why does this matter to you?" Deho asked. "Because you were my hero growing up. Because humans need something to believe in again. And because that monster needs to pay for what he did to you." The next morning, Lee So-min arrived with more evidence about the suspicious deaths of human fighters. Her investigation had uncovered financial records showing payments from Krex Empire accounts to various security consultants shortly before each death. "It is not solid proof that would hold up in court," she admitted, "but the pattern is clear. Someone has been systematically eliminating human competition in galactic combat sports. She showed them security footage from several training facilities where the accidents had occurred. In each case, equipment had mysteriously malfunctioned at exactly the wrong moment. Safety systems had failed just when they were needed most. 12 good fighters are dead, she said quietly, and the only human champion left alive is sitting in this room, telling everyone he has finished fighting. I am finished, Deho said, but his voice lacked conviction. Are you? Because from what I can see, you are the only one left who can make them pay for what they have done. That night, Deho's training intensified. He worked through complex combat scenarios, imagining opponents with forearms, enhanced speed, artificial reflexes. His remaining arm moved in patterns that would have seemed impossible to observers who did not understand the physics of asymmetric fighting. His apartment had become a laboratory for perfecting human combat potential. Every movement was calculated, every exercise designed to push his body beyond its previous limits. At 3 a.m., he stopped training and sat by his window, looking out at the lights of Nexus Prime. Somewhere out there, Veltar was probably celebrating another day of unchallenged supremacy. The champion believed he had broken the human spirit forever. Deho touched his empty sleeve, remembering the pain of losing his arm, the months of recovery, the slow realization that his fighting career was over. But now he understood something that had taken 3 years to learn. Losing his arm had not ended his career. It had begun his evolution. A predator that lost a limb did not become weaker. It became more dangerous because it had to learn new ways to hunt. It had to become creative, unpredictable, deadly in ways its prey could not anticipate. For the first time since Kepler Station, Park Deho smiled. 6 months after the humiliation at Nexus Prime, strange stories began circulating through the Outer Rim fighting circuits. A mysterious human warrior had appeared on remote worlds, entering small tournaments under false names. He never showed, his face always wearing a simple mask, and he never lost. The first reports came from Kepler 7, a mining world where fighters competed for spare credits and bragging rights. A masked human had defeated 3 local champions in a single night, moving with fluid grace that defied explanation. Witnesses described his fighting style as ghost-like, claiming he seemed to strike from impossible angles. More stories followed, from other worlds. On Terminus Station, the masked fighter had defeated a Gorvani berserker twice his size without taking a single hit. On New Ceres, he had faced 5 opponents simultaneously and left them all unconscious within minutes. What made the stories remarkable was not just the victories, but how they were achieved. The mysterious fighter used minimal equipment and relied on technique rather than strength. He moved like someone who had learned to turn disadvantages into weapons. Quan Jae-min, a former military officer who had served with Deho during the Kepler Station incident, saw one of these fights on Horizon Colony. He recognized the movement patterns immediately, despite the mask and the evolved technique. He tracked down Deho 3 days later at a small training facility on the colony's outskirts. His old friend was practicing alone, working through combat, forms that Jae-min had never seen before. I wondered when you would find me, Deho said without turning around. That was you in the arena last night. I know your style, even changed as it is. Deho stopped training and faced his former comrade. Jae-min was shocked by what he saw. The man before him was still recognizably Park Deho, but transformed. His remaining arm showed muscle definition that seemed impossible for a single limb. His stance was perfectly balanced despite the asymmetry. Most striking were his eyes, which held a focus and intensity that surpassed even his championship days. Why are you doing this? Jae-min asked. What is the point of fighting on these backwater worlds under a false name? I am learning, Deho replied simply. Learning what? How to fight with one arm. How to use my disadvantage as a weapon. How to become something my enemies cannot predict or counter. Jae-min watched as Deho demonstrated a series of techniques that redefined the possibilities of single-limb combat. His friend had not just adapted to his injury, he had evolved beyond it. The loss of my arm forced me to rediscover what makes humans unique among galactic species, Daeho explained. We adapt. We improvise. We find ways to survive and thrive under impossible conditions. He showed Jamin how his fighting style had changed. Where he once relied on speed and bilateral coordination, he now used unpredictability and physics. His single arm created strike patterns that confused opponents trained to face symmetrical attackers. His balance points were constantly shifting, making him nearly impossible to grapple or predict. I have fought 47 matches in 6 months, Daeho said. 47 victories against opponents who thought they understood human limitations. Each fight taught me something new about the possibilities of asymmetric combat. And now? Now I am ready for the real test. Back on Nexus Prime, Dr. Hei Ri had been following the stories about the mysterious masked fighter with growing excitement. She ran statistical analyses of the reported fighting techniques, comparing them to her detailed knowledge of human physiology and combat biomechanics. The conclusions were remarkable. The masked fighter was not just winning, he was revolutionizing human combat doctrine. Every technique he displayed pushed the boundaries of what medical science believed possible for single-limb fighters. She shared her findings with Tae-sung, who had continued developing equipment specifically designed for Daeho's evolved fighting style. The young mechanic had created a full set of gear that enhanced human capabilities without replacing them. Look at this balance enhancer, he showed her excitedly. It does not do the work for the fighter. Instead, it amplifies his natural ability to adapt to changing conditions, and this armor design redistributes impact force along asymmetric patterns that turn the wearer's apparent weakness into a tactical advantage. Meanwhile, the galactic fighting community was buzzing with speculation about the masked human's identity. Some believed he was a new fighter trained by hidden human masters. Others thought he might be a modified warrior using illegal enhancements. No one suspected the truth. Veltar dismissed the stories entirely. Tales from primitive worlds, he told reporters. Probably exaggerated for entertainment value. No human could achieve such feats through skill alone. But privately, the champion was troubled. His own performance had been declining slightly over the past months. The bio-enhancements he depended on required increasingly frequent recalibration. His body was developing a tolerance that made the artificial improvements less effective over time. His handlers assured him this was normal and temporary. They increased his enhancement doses and adjusted his training regimen. But Veltar could feel the difference. The absolute confidence that had carried him to championship was beginning to crack. On a cold morning, 6 months after beginning his journey, Daeho registered for the Nexus Prime qualifying tournament under the name Kim Soo-ho. He wore simple combat gear and the same plain mask he had used for months. To the registration officials, he was just another hopeful fighter trying to make a name for himself. The qualifying rounds would determine which warriors earned the right to challenge the lower-ranked champions, with the ultimate goal of facing Veltar himself. It was a long path with many dangerous opponents, but Daeho had prepared for this moment through countless hours of evolution and training. His first opponent was a Zentari warrior named Klex, known for his lightning-fast multiple-limb attacks. The betting odds heavily favored the alien, as they did for every match involving humans. The fight lasted exactly 93 seconds. Daeho moved like liquid shadow, flowing around Klex's attacks while delivering precise strikes that disrupted the Zentari's nervous system. His phantom strike technique had evolved far beyond its original form. Where it once created the illusion of multiple simultaneous attacks, it now seemed to bend space itself, allowing strikes from angles that should have been geometrically impossible. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Klex collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. The mysterious human had not just won, he had made it look effortless. Incredible technique, commented Park Ji-won, the arena's primary sports announcer. I have never seen fighting like this. The human appears to be using some form of combat, mathematics that I cannot begin to understand. In the arena's medical wing, Dr. Hei Ri watched the match with growing certainty. She knew those movements, that precision, that controlled power, She also knew that the man in the ring was operating at levels of human performance that should have been medically impossible. Tae-sung watched from the technical booth, monitoring every aspect of the fight through the arena's sensor systems. His equipment readings confirmed what his eyes were seeing. The masked fighter was achieving victory through pure skill, enhanced by perfectly designed gear, with no artificial enhancements of any kind. As Dae-ho left the arena that night, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first step was complete. He had announced his return to galactic combat sports, even if no one yet knew his true identity. 46 more victories on Outer Worlds had been preparation. Tonight had been the real beginning of his hunt. Somewhere in the city, Veltar was probably celebrating another day as unchallenged champion. The reptilian warrior had no idea that his own death warrant was walking the streets of Nexus Prime, hidden behind a simple mask and a name that meant nothing to anyone, but Park Dae-ho knew. And for the first time in 3 years, that was enough. The Nexus Prime Grand Tournament drew warriors from across the galaxy. For 2 weeks, the greatest fighters in known space would compete for the ultimate prize, a chance to face Veltar the Unstoppable in single combat. The winner would claim the title of Galactic Champion and all the honor that came with it. Veltar entered the tournament as he always did, with overwhelming confidence and supreme arrogance. At 34 years old, he was in his physical prime, his bio-enhancements perfectly calibrated for maximum performance. He had held the championship for 4 years without a single serious challenge. But those who looked closely might have noticed subtle changes in the champion. His reptilian scales, once perfectly lustrous, now showed faint stress patterns around the enhancement ports where artificial improvements were fed into his system. His movements, while still incredibly fast, occasionally showed tiny hesitations that had not existed in previous years. Dr. Hayri noticed these details as she conducted the mandatory medical examinations for all tournament participants. Veltar's enhancement dependency was progressing exactly as her research had predicted. His body was building tolerance to the artificial improvements, requiring higher and higher doses to maintain the same level of performance. The masked human, fighter still competing under the name Kim Suho, passed his medical examination with results that amazed Hayri. His physical condition had advanced even beyond what she had observed months earlier. Every system in his body was operating at peak efficiency, not through artificial enhancement but through perfect natural optimization. "How are you achieving these results?" she asked quietly during the examination, hoping he would reveal his identity. "Training," he replied simply, his voice carefully modulated to disguise any recognizable qualities. The tournament's early rounds proceeded as expected. Veltar demolished his opponents with casual efficiency, each victory reinforcing his reputation as an unstoppable force. The crowds loved his displays of overwhelming power, cheering as alien warrior after alien warrior fell before his enhanced might. The mysterious human fighters' matches drew a different kind of attention. His victories were not brutal displays of force but elegant demonstrations of technique. He defeated opponents through precision and intelligence, often ending fights so quickly that spectators barely had time to understand what had happened. Park Ji-won, covering the tournament for Galactic Sports Networks, found himself increasingly fascinated by the masked fighter's style. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced during one match, "what we are witnessing here is a complete revolution in combat technique. This human fighter is not just winning matches, he is redefining the possibilities of single combatant warfare." Tae-sung monitored every fight from the technical booth, tracking the performance of the equipment he had designed. Everything was working perfectly, enhancing the fighter's natural abilities without replacing them. More importantly, he could see the psychological effect the victories were having on other competitors. For the first time in years, alien warriors were studying human fighting techniques, trying to understand how such apparent disadvantages could be turned into overwhelming advantages. As the tournament progressed toward the championship rounds, humanity throughout the galaxy began to take notice. The masked fighters' victories were being broadcast to every human colony world, sparking hope that had been dormant since Dae-ho's fall from grace. On Earth, in the military academies, instructors showed recordings of the matches to cadets, analyzing, techniques that seemed to violate basic principles of combat physics. How could a single-armed fighter move faster than opponents with multiple limbs? How could asymmetric attacks be more effective than balanced assaults? Ambassador Choi Min-ho watched the tournament coverage from his office with growing excitement. The mysterious human's success was already having diplomatic effects. Other species representatives were beginning to reconsider their dismissive attitudes toward human capabilities. Perhaps, Zektar had admitted grudgingly during their latest meeting, we underestimated human potential. The semi-final round brought the tournament's most anticipated match, the masked human versus Korax the Annihilator, Veltar's former training partner and the second-ranked fighter in the galaxy. Korax stood 9 feet tall, with 6 arms and enhancement, modifications that made him nearly as formidable as the champion himself. The betting odds heavily favored Korax. No human had ever defeated a top-tier enhanced warrior in single combat, and Korax had never lost a match except to Veltar. What happened next would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. The fight began with Korax's signature move, a 6-armed assault designed to overwhelm any defense through sheer volume of attacks. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to strike from multiple angles simultaneously, while his bio-enhanced strength made each blow potentially lethal. The masked human did something unexpected. Instead of retreating or attempting to block the assault, he moved forward, directly into the center of Korax's attack pattern. To the crowd, it looked like suicide. To trained fighters watching, it looked like the mysterious human had finally met an opponent beyond his capabilities. They were all wrong. What followed was a display of the evolved phantom strike technique that redefined combat possibilities. The human seemed to occupy multiple positions simultaneously, his single arm creating a defensive pattern that somehow deflected all 6 of Korax's attacks, while simultaneously launching a counter-assault. The physics should have been impossible. One arm could not block 6 arms while also attacking, but the masked fighter was not fighting with normal physics. He was fighting with angles, timing, and spatial mathematics that turned his opponent's advantages into liabilities. Korax's 6 arms became a hindrance rather than an advantage. The complex coordination required to manage multiple limbs created fractional delays that the human exploited with surgical precision. Each of Korax's strikes was redirected into the path of another, causing the enhanced warrior to interfere with his own attacks. The fight lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ended, Korax lay unconscious on the arena floor, having been defeated without the human taking a single significant hit. The crowd sat in stunned silence. Even the announcers were speechless. What they had witnessed challenged fundamental assumptions about combat, strength, and the limitations of single-limb fighters. In his private viewing box, Veltar watched the fight with growing unease. For the first time since becoming champion, he felt something he had not experienced in years: uncertainty. The mysterious human's fighting style was unlike anything in his combat databases. His bio-enhanced reflexes were programmed to counter known attack patterns, but this opponent seemed to create new patterns in real time, making prediction and automated response impossible. Analyze that fight, Veltar ordered his handlers. I want to know everything about this human's techniques. But even as his team began their analysis, Veltar knew they would find no easy answers. The masked fighter had just demonstrated capabilities that exceeded the parameters of enhanced combat algorithms. In the arena's medical wing, Dr. Hayri checked on Korax's condition while reviewing the sensor data from the fight. The readings were remarkable. The human had achieved victory through efficiency rather than power, using minimal energy to maximum effect while operating at stress levels that remained within healthy ranges. Meanwhile, Taesung backed up all the technical data from the match. This fight would be studied by human military strategists for decades, but right now it served a more immediate purpose: proof that human ingenuity could overcome any artificial advantage. As the arena emptied and preparations began for the championship match, the masked fighter sat quietly in his preparation room. He had spent 3 years evolving his techniques, 6 months testing them against increasingly difficult opponents, and 2 weeks proving himself worthy of this moment. Tomorrow, he would face Veltar the Unstoppable for the championship of the galaxy. More importantly, he would have the chance to collect payment for a debt of honor that had been outstanding for far too long. But first, there was one final preparation to make. Reaching up, he slowly removed the simple mask he had worn for months, revealing the scarred but determined face of Park Dae-ho. The hunt was almost over. The championship match was scheduled for the final day of the tournament, broadcast live to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Over 2 billion beings would witness the contest between Veltar the Unstoppable and the mysterious masked human, who had emerged from nowhere to challenge the greatest warrior alive. In his preparation chamber, Veltar underwent final enhancement calibrations. His handlers pushed his biomodifications to their absolute maximum levels, flooding his system with artificial improvements that made his already formidable abilities truly terrifying. His forearms moved with inhuman speed. His reflexes operated faster than conscious thought, and his strength could shatter steel. But beneath the artificial confidence, doubt gnawed at him. The masked human's fighting style defied every combat algorithm in his database. His enhancement programming had no responses for attacks that seemed to come from impossible angles. He is still just a human, Veltar told himself, practicing combination attacks that had never failed to destroy opponents. One arm against 4. Natural reflexes against enhanced speed. He cannot win. In the opposing preparation chamber, Dae-ho sat in quiet meditation. Dr. Hae-ri ran final medical checks, while Tae-sung made last-minute adjustments to the lightweight equipment that would give every possible advantage to human technique without replacing human capability. "Your vitals are perfect," Hae-ri reported. "Heart rate steady, muscle tension optimal, neural activity showing the focus patterns of a warrior in complete control. The equipment is calibrated for your specific fighting style," Tae-sung added. "Balance enhancement, impact redistribution, and response amplification all tuned to work with your evolved techniques." Lee So-min arrived with her recording equipment, having been granted exclusive access to document the match from the human preparation area. "Are you ready to reveal your identity?" she asked. Dae-ho nodded, reaching for the simple mask he had worn for so long. "The galaxy needs to understand what this fight is really about." The arena filled to capacity an hour before the match. Every seat was occupied, every viewing screen activated. Ambassador Choi Min-ho sat in the diplomatic section alongside representatives from dozens of species. The Krex delegation, led by Zektar, occupied the place of honor reserved for the champion's supporters. As the fighters entered the arena, a hush fell over the massive crowd. Veltar appeared first, his enhanced form gleaming under the arena lights. His forearms moved in complex patterns, demonstrating speed and coordination that seemed almost magical. The crowd roared its appreciation for their champion. Then the mysterious human emerged from the opposite entrance. He wore simple combat gear that looked almost primitive compared to Veltar's bio-enhanced magnificence. For a moment, he stood, perfectly still, surveying the arena with the calm attention of a predator selecting its hunting ground. Then he reached up and removed his mask. The arena erupted in chaos as Park Dae-ho's scarred face appeared on screens throughout the galaxy. Gasps, shouts, and cries of disbelief echoed from the stands. The greatest human warrior in galactic history, thought broken and finished, stood in the championship arena once again. Veltar's reptilian features twisted with shock and rage. "Impossible," he hissed into his microphone. "You are nothing now. A broken cripple living on scraps and pity." Dae-ho's response carried clearly through the arena's acoustic systems. "I was broken, Veltar, you were right about that. But you made a mistake." "What mistake?" "You assumed that being broken meant being defeated. You never understood what happens when a human has nothing left to lose except honor." The referee, a neutral tribunal judge, called the fighters to the center of the arena. Standard championship rules applied. No weapons beyond natural limbs and standard equipment, victory by knockout or submission, no artificial enhancements beyond those already integrated into a fighter's physiology. As they faced each other, the contrast was stark. Veltar stood 8 feet tall, forearms ready to unleash devastation, scales gleaming with bio-enhanced armor. Deho stood 6 feet tall, one arm, wearing simple protective gear that looked fragile by comparison. The betting odds displayed on arena screens showed 10,000 to 1 against the human. "Begin," the referee announced. Veltar attacked immediately, all 4 arms launching simultaneous strikes designed to end the fight in seconds. His bio-enhanced speed made his assault nearly invisible to normal vision. A blur of claws and crushing force that should have overwhelmed any defense. Deho moved. What happened next redefined the possibilities of single-limb combat. Instead of retreating from the four-armed assault, Deho flowed forward, his evolved Phantom Strike technique allowing him to exist in the spaces between Veltar's attacks. His single arm seemed to multiply, creating defensive patterns that redirected the champion's strikes while simultaneously launching counterattacks. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the impossible became reality. One arm was blocking 4 arms while also attacking. A human was matching an enhanced alien speed through technique alone. Everything they thought they knew about combat was being rewritten before their eyes. Veltar's bio-enhancements began working against him. His artificial reflexes, programmed for conventional combat, could not adapt to Deho's asymmetric fighting style. The 0.3-second delay Tai Sung had identified became more pronounced under the psychological pressure of facing an opponent who defied every programmed response. "This is not possible," Veltar snarled, increasing his attack speed to maximum enhancement levels. "You never understood humans," Deho replied, his voice calm despite the incredible physical demands of the fight. "We do not win through superior strength or artificial improvements. We win through adaptation, intelligence, and the refusal to surrender." The fight continued for 7 minutes, far longer than any of Veltar's recent victories. With each passing moment, the champion's enhancement dependency became more obvious. His movements grew slightly less coordinated as his body struggled to maintain peak artificial performance. His strikes became more predictable as his bio-programming defaulted to standard attack patterns. Deho, meanwhile, seemed to grow stronger as the fight progressed. His asymmetric fighting style was designed for extended combat, using efficiency and technique to conserve energy while maximizing impact. Every movement served multiple purposes. Every defense became an attack. Every apparent disadvantage became a tactical advantage. The turning point came when Veltar, desperate and increasingly erratic, attempted his signature killing combination. A 4-armed assault designed to overwhelm any defense through sheer volume of simultaneous attacks. It was the same technique that had defeated hundreds of opponents. Deho did not try to block it. Instead, he moved forward, directly into the center of the attack pattern. For a moment, it looked like suicide. Then the evolved Phantom Strike technique revealed its full potential. Deho seemed to fold space around himself, his single arm creating a defensive matrix that not only deflected all 4 of Veltar's attacks, but also guided them into interfering with each other. The champion's own strikes became entangled, creating a moment of perfect vulnerability. Deho struck once, a single precise blow that bypassed all of Veltar's bio-enhanced defenses. The strike targeted the nexus point where the champion's artificial, nervous enhancements connected to his natural neural system. It was a technique that required perfect knowledge of alien physiology combined with flawless timing and placement. Veltar's enhanced reflexes shut down instantly. His bio-enhanced strength flickered and failed. His artificial speed became meaningless. For the first time in years, he was fighting with only his natural abilities against an opponent who had spent 3 years perfecting the art of asymmetric warfare. The champion fell, not from physical injury but from the complete collapse of his artificial advantages. His enhancement addiction, exposed to the stress of unexpected combat conditions, triggered a systemic withdrawal that left him helpless on the arena floor. Standing over his fallen opponent, Deho spoke words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "You mocked a fallen human, Veltar. You thought my injuries made me weak, my losses made me pathetic. But you never understood what you were really seeing. You were not looking at a broken warrior. You were looking at evolution in progress." He turned to face the cameras that were broadcasting his words to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Humans do not win through artificial enhancement or superior physical capabilities. We win through adaptation, through learning from failure, through becoming something our enemies never expected us to be. You thought you had destroyed human honor with your mockery. Instead, you gave us the motivation to transcend our limitations. The arena erupted in thunderous applause, not just from human spectators but from aliens who had witnessed something unprecedented. A warrior who had transformed apparent defeat into ultimate victory through will, intelligence, and the refusal to accept that any challenge was insurmountable. In the diplomatic section, Ambassador Choi Min-ho smiled as he watched representatives from dozens of species rise to applaud the new champion. Humanity's position in the galactic community had been restored in a single afternoon of combat that proved human potential exceeded any artificial limitation.